Awesome. So Tony, so we're back. And so obviously this is a two-parter because there's a lot here to unpack. And we were just getting to some of the really juicy stuff about, actually I'm not even going to say it. I don't want to spoil the flow. So the way that we left off was talking about the beginner's mindset, right? Being humble and really being inquisitive about, hey, is there a better way? And learning from anybody and everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really powerful concept. And so I would say that in the martial arts, it's very easy to go down that path, something that we spoke of earlier, of having an ego saying, hey, look at all of my credentials. How are you ever going to teach me anything when I am a X degree, whatever,
Mhm.
And I think that taking the opposite of, almost like the higher you are, the more that you've been into it, it's like, okay, like let's look at everybody's perspective. Let's be white belts every single day in every single thing that we do. And that's really powerful. So you're talking about, looking to Aikidoists and whatnot. So I didn't want to cut you off and sort of keep that going. So if you have any more examples of that I would definitely love to keep going down that path.
So I don't have a ton of personal experience with Aikido, but um, there have been some interesting observations over the course of my studies about martial arts in general and jujitsu. And I got in the pandemic, like right away in the pandemic, I stumbled across a page, a YouTube, what was it, Kendo Star, I think it's called. So I started getting into Kendo.
And those
And
cool. Yeah.
yeah, Kendo's awesome. Oh my God, is it so much fun? Um, but I started getting into Kendo and I started really, really, really diving into the Japanese side of martial arts and what's what's it for? What's the history? What's I just got really engrossed in it because I didn't have a lot else to do. Um, and I have a Bokken, and so I started playing a little bit more with like actual kendo instead of just my little Star Wars routine. Yeah, whatever that I would play with before, like
Full
make it
force.
up as I go, whatever. Um, so I started down that road, and I started to find that um, it's hard to how to say this. It's hard for me to swallow the idea that these martial arts don't have anything to offer. I've had plenty of people, and I've even been guilty of this over time, of where it's like, oh, that doesn't work. That stuff, that's no good. Don't bother learning that. That system isn't good for street self-defense, or and I do feel like there are things that have gotten I don't want to use the word watered down, but let's just say um, they're not meant necessarily for that street fight application the way that they used to be. Things have
Yes.
changed, and they lost touch a little bit in certain areas, but in other areas they're still very effective. And we talked about this the other day, the idea that a lot of these martial arts have become highly specialized. So it's not that they're ineffective. It's just that they're good in the situation, in the context that they're meant for. Um,
But I think it's an interesting point, right? And that was something that in our discussion the other day really jumped out at me, right? Is, as I confessed, I'm actually a huge fan of Aikido for what it is, right? Like I look at it and it's like, okay, would I learn Aikido over Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? No, I wouldn't, because I do love the effectiveness, the sheer undeniable effectiveness of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. However, I believe that Aikido is beautiful and powerful. And to be good at Aikido, you have to really put in a lot of work, a lot of effort. And that is a difficult skill to master. And then you look at the origins to it, right? It's like that was pretty interesting. It was something that you said, and I don't want to go through and steal it.
yeah.
So what were you saying about judo and Aikido and kind of the intention, right? Because I think that's what you were going to.
Yeah. So Ueshiba Sensei was the founder of Aikido, and he was a student at the Kodokan, if I understand correctly. And so he was a judo guy. And he also he put back a lot of the wrist techniques and things that had been taken out of judo, because judo was meant as early on in the 1900s, judo was attempting to become the physical education for the school system in Japan.
Yep.
That was Kano's mission. A huge part of his mission was to create an educational system that would be accepted in the school system in Japan. And the Japanese government kept coming with all these impositions and things. Oh, we don't like that, we don't like this, you're gonna have to get rid of that. And he made Kano, he made a lot of concessions from the jujitsu that he was teaching in order to accomplish the mission of getting this into the education system in Japan. And that was something that when Ueshiba Sensei decided that he was going to create his own martial art, he put a lot of that stuff back. And I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is that Aikido as a system isn't very old. I believe it was formalized in the 1950s, and so it has a lot of old Japanese jiu-jitsu in it, with a lot of the wrist locks, a lot of the joint manipulations with wrists and balance control, and in many ways it operates under the same principles as judo or jiu-jitsu, but I would say that it's specialized. So it's not that it's not that it is bad, because none of this stuff, like you can get wrist locks. I mean, just look at Pete the Greek, wrist lock the world. And anybody that gets good at wrist locks becomes a nightmare for everyone, and memes are made about you.
Yes,
Okay?
I have nightmares about wrist locks, right?
So wrist locks, who can deny how useful a wrist lock is?
Yeah.
And Aikido has tons of that. So where's the connection? Well, I stumbled across a video a long time ago about the history of jiu-jitsu, the history of martial arts in general, and this bringing martial arts into the 20th century after the samurai era ended. And I got really into this subject, and there are a couple people that are pretty good at fleshing some of this history out, because it's obscure and it's, there's all kinds of messy details. And of course, we're talking about Imperial Japan now, which Americans are, I guess, prejudiced against that part of Japan, which is fine, because a lot of bad things happened. And so most people just don't like to look at that period of history. But from the martial arts perspective, a lot shifted in that time frame. And I think that in this particular podcast that's coming to mind, the one thing that the guy was talking about was this idea of judo being kind of a really great place to start. And then after 5 or 10 years of good judo training, now it's time to learn Aikido. It's like a finishing school.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea being that, okay, judo is a good base. It teaches you a great understanding of kazushi and throws and takedowns and basic groundwork. But you could also look at Aikido as like, that's the next level. Okay, let's add this stuff as an after, a completion of your training in this particular skill set of, throws, trips, takedowns.
I love that, right? Like, as we were talking about this the other day too, that was cool, is, Aikido is super effective against a very specific type of attack, right? And I think that I think Aikido's detractors, that's probably the number one thing that they hold up is they'll say, hey, yes, the attack has to be too specific. This would never be in the real world. And I think that was one of the things that I loved about our discussion was, yes, but there's still a ton of value in this. Like, let's find the value in everything. And I think that every different art, there's a lot of, you'll see some funny videos on YouTube about, black belts who can't throw a proper kick. But then, and it's like, it's very quick to say, oh, karate sucks, right? Like, karate is terrible. It's like, it's ineffective. And you look at another video and you're like, wow, there are some people doing karate kicks who are really sharp and really good that are like, wow, they're terrifying. I would never want to be kicked by that. And it's so funny, right? It's the implementation of that. And it comes back down to, I think there's an honesty, like I think there's an honesty and a self reflection in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu where we're very honest about our standing. Like when I roll with my partner, it isn't a theoretical kata where I'm like, I'm going through a kata and I look very sharp, but will it ever work if somebody tries to hit me or take me down? In BJJ, right? You know, you learn, you watch your professor do the move, you know, you watch your instructor do the move, you practice it, and then you roll and you work to integrate it in. And you'll see the defenses for it, and you see that there are just layers and just so many levels to the skill of interpreting what's coming your way and countering and then using it and setting things up almost like a chess match. I think in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, we're very, very reflective and honest about, okay, you got me, like, but how did you get me? And that builds that partnership and that bond that really strips the ego away, because I could have all of the ego in the world until my partner submits me, you know, 10 times in a 5-minute roll. And I'm like, okay, well, how did you do this? Right. You don't necessarily get that in katas, right? You're like, well, look at my belt. I've got an extra stripe than you, or it's a different color belt. So I love that thing about always exploring and learning. And I think it was fascinating, you know, your thoughts on Aikido and how every martial art has its purpose. And if you practice it at a high level in its purest application, every martial art is super effective. Did that sort of sum it up the way you were thinking about it the other day?
Yeah, definitely. We were talking about this idea of specialized situations, and that many of these martial arts have become specialized over time, and that's true. So if we're honest about our practice, right? Like I want to be the best fighter that I can be. Well, then we should be open-minded, right? Going back
Yes.
to Shoshin, we
Yeah.
should be willing to explore new ideas. We should be happy that someone is bringing a new idea to us and see what works and what doesn't. Like you said, the beauty of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is that everything is put to the test. The questions are answered. There's no theoretical nonsense. Like, yes, we practice kata by the definition of the word when we do our drilling, right? But we also apply that immediately in sparring and find out, hey, does that work? And
That's
then
the acid
what's,
test.
yeah, for sure. But the thing is, even in jujitsu, let me ask you a question. When you learned your Americana for the first time, I mean, I don't know how long it was before you started sparring, but let's just say the first time that you tried to do an Americana in sparring, did it work?
No, it did
No.
not.
So Gracie Jiu Jitsu sucks. It doesn't work.
Yep.
Why? Is that true? I mean, I don't think that's true. Eventually it
No.
starts to work.
Oh yeah, and you're right, and it comes down to the sensitivity and you have to adapt your move to your partner. Now, it
And
depends
to
on
yourself.
the skill level of the person you're trying to do the Americana on, and my own sort of confidence and my own tricks in getting it set up. Those are the things where that's another thing I love about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is you take responsibility for your own development, realizing that every move works. It's just you need to also play with the application to adjust to the situation. Would I be able to get Henner in an Americana arm lock? No, I probably never will be able to. But it's like, could I get the
Stay
person that's their
positive.
first time rolling? Yeah, I'll give it. I'll give it a try. I'll try to stay positive, but I'm also trying to stay realistic. But would I get Henner in the Americana? Slim. Okay, slim at best. And I'm just sort of bragging and saying that. Could I get somebody it's their first time rolling that they've never seen the move, they've never defended the move in a sparring situation? My odds went up, right? So I'm a purple belt. I've been doing it for 10 years now or 9 years. So it's definitely situational. And that comes back down to another thing we talked about the other day that I thought was really important was this concept of protecting legacy. And we have to be honest with each other and honest with ourselves to continuously move this beautiful thing forward that we call Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so if we live in a bubble and if we say, okay, do it because we say so, even if there's a better way, well, then our legacy is going to get tarnished. And one of the things I'm so proud of is, like you said, everything gets put to the test. So in talking about that legacy, there's obviously and sadly there are some people who use credentials in various martial arts for their own personal gain, for their ego, for other sort of bad purposes, right? And I know it's something that we talk about, like sort of like this sacred responsibility of the stuff that we do. And for you, because I'm not an instructor, but for you, since you have students, right? What does that responsibility feel like to you in the way that you interact with your students on a daily basis?
Mm. Well, it's a good question. It's difficult to really flesh out a great answer for this, but I guess a really simple answer would be that it may be the heaviest responsibility that exists on earth because I'm teaching someone something that if it ever needs to be applied is in the most important circumstance of their life. They're being attacked, it's imminent danger. What do I do? How do I save my life? How do I save someone else's life? Um, how do I survive?
Yeah.
It doesn't get more important than that. And this is one thing that I underestimated when I was 2017 calling Coach Bundy saying, "Hey, I want to teach jujitsu." Like I said, I mean, yeah, I wanted to teach self-defense, but it was like, I just teach some sweet moves, everything will be good, no big
Yep.
deal. And then as time has gone on and I've become an apprentice under Coach Bundy and started to teach people a little bit and sharing their experiences and understanding where they're coming from as humans and you know what they've gone through and why they're here and like talk about eye-opening. You're talking about people that are coming to you with serious trauma sometimes that have
Yep.
had horrible experiences, whether it's at another jujitsu school or a life experience where they got attacked, or maybe they're just super shy. And this is something that is going to help them to improve their life, their whole life in a profound way. So, this sacred responsibility that we have is to deliver the product that we've been taught and remember that it's not our product. It's
Yeah.
not mine. I don't own this. um I teach something that was taught to me, that was taught to him, that was taught to him, and this goes back a long way longer than Brazil, by the way.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I remember I had an experience at my at Coach Bundy's school where a student said something along the lines of, because I was talking about Japan, and he said something about how, oh yeah, but jujitsu's from Brazil. And I'm like, what? No, jujitsu's from Japan, my friend. And the philosophical concepts go back far beyond that, you know? So we have a duty, I think, to understand our heritage, to understand where this martial art comes from, what's it for, what are the philosophical concepts that underpin it, and how can we apply it in as many areas as possible, right? Because why would you bother coming to a place to learn one thing when you could go to that same place and learn a wide ranging, life changing skill set? Why limit yourself to just physical?
No, and I think that is really, it's an important distinction to make, right? Because there's, again, looking at certain martial arts and especially Hollywood's portrayal of martial arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's effectiveness and violence and all of these things. And it's like, oh, well, you study karate, go do a Jean-Claude Van Damme, spinning heel kick, and then, you're all good. And I think that in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, a big part of the conversation is, wait, avoid the fight. Like if you need to swallow your ego, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your parking spot. Hey, listen, my bad. Okay, hey, I'm sorry, my friend. Like, let's walk away. It's so much better than all of the posturing, like, oh, you never have to back down and this and that. It's, to me, that mindset is very powerful because the only fight you're going to win is the one that you're not in, right? Like it's you get a mutual damage, right? No matter how good you are. And there's
Yeah.
always that risk of bad things happening kind of on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that just resonates with me about that honesty and that authenticity about what is combat and why are you here studying this? Are you going to be a bouncer in a nightclub? Or are you shy and want to avoid physical contact, but you want to have enough confidence to be able to not get walked on, to be able to at least stand up for yourself?
Or just make friends.
Or just make friends. And for me, what's funny? So I'm 51 years old and it is my social life now. And I realize that, right? And it's like my jujitsu friends are like brothers and sisters from all different walks of life. And that's the one unifying thing. It is so satisfying and it's so mentally healthy to go and see people who are also working towards their goals. I get more excited when one of my friends starts to hit a move that they couldn't hit before, than more excited than if I were hitting that move, right? It's like, you get that shared victory.
Yeah.
And there is a responsibility to understand the lineage, right? And I think that, you get some people who just look past it for different reasons, but I love the Shoshin aspect, right? Of always being a student and learning more, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And there's so much to learn, like so much that I mean, why? I mean, when it should be your favorite subject. So, I mean, if you're going to be on the mat all this time, why not become an expert at as many aspects of it as you can? Like I just find it fascinating, and so I mean, if there's a good samurai book, if there's a good um, you know, nice little YouTube clip or something. Like I said, Lente Brothers, oh my God, they are a treasure trove.
Yep.
They're amazing.
Yep.
And I had the honor and privilege to visit their school, and they have a beautiful museum where they have pictures and they have a full samurai armor set, which is just I mean, like it's kind of creepy in a certain way because if you go in there in the dark, it's like, oh God, there's a guy. but but it's the coolest thing. I mean, to be that close to history, someone wore this on the battlefield. Mm, like that's fun.
And it's so powerful, right? And it's funny. So my wife and kids and I, we went to the Samurai Museum in Shinjuku in Tokyo, and it was
So
it was amazing. You see the actual swords that Miyamoto Musashi used, right? And it's like, you see suits of armor, and they did some really cool demonstrations. And I'm a huge fan of samurai culture. And I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. Age of Samurai Battle for Japan is amazing.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I'm not through it, but yeah, I've started it. Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, there's so much to learn. And also, and this is from a couple of the people that I was talking about earlier, that um, Japanese history is difficult to learn because there's a lot of, um, it's hard to tell what's fact and what's fiction sometimes.
yep.
So you kind of have to watch your sources to a degree. but but it's so cool to see that spirit that because even in the stuff that's not exactly historically accurate, the spirit of it is still pretty close to the way that they um, to their true psychology, their nature, the way they looked at things and thought about things. So cool.
Yep. And what I wanted to bring that all back full circle, and you're far too humble to probably accept this, but I want to put this out there. When you were telling me about your commute, I was like, wow, that is actually very, very samurai-ish, because it's not easy to drive 80 miles each way. It's not easy to drive 160 miles per class. But what you do was you took it, you said, okay, I'm going to lose this part of my life because this part over here is important enough for me to do that. That was very, very samurai. And that was the reason why I wanted to like dig into that specifically. And I've got a ton of respect. I mean, that's a lot of miles each way. And also we're talking about sketchy winter driving sometimes, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm down here in Southern California and I'm complaining about my 35 miles or whatever, and it's so worth it. But it was that dedication is something where when you find true love with like, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and it just clicks, all of a sudden it's like, you'll drive to the ends of the earth, because I passed by a lot of schools on my way to get down to Gracie University.
Yeah.
I mean, I passed by probably 15 to 20 different jiu-jitsu schools in that 35-mile stretch. And so I wanted to call that out. And I wanted to also ask, were there any other things that you wanted to get in? Because what I'd love to do is I'd love to provide a link, a link to this video, a link to your school, your contact information, where you are, who you are, and if somebody's in your area, for them to reach out.
Yeah.
Would you be okay if I provided that to the listeners here when I could drop a link there and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we have a pretty good social media presence at Shoshin JJ Erie PA. That's on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a website that is still under construction. So you can get at us on the website, and I am usually pretty quick to respond there. But it doesn't look like a whole lot right now. So we're working on that. But yeah, you're more than welcome to share any of that information. And I hope that we can help as many people as we can. It's been an amazing response from the community right off the bat. Um, like I was shocked when we made that website go live, and it's just a little splash page with a contact form. I immediately started getting inquiries. Um, we opened our school in November. We have 40 members right now. I think 5 people coming to try class this week. I
Wow.
have 130 people on a prospect list, and I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am for that response. And it's humbling beyond belief that people would take and invest their time and their energy and their money into a place like this with some guy like me that nobody knows. I'm not Henry Gracie opening a school in Erie, Pennsylvania. So why is it that I have any credibility at all? Well, it's a thanks to many teachers that have helped me along the way. The Pedro Sauer Association has been absolutely fantastic, um, and I've been extremely fortunate to have a lot of things line up along the way. Um, but and I don't know how much time we have left or how much you want to dive into other topics, but the personal development side of things is very interesting to me, and maybe we could do it a different time, or we could dive into it now. I'll kind of leave that on you. But
I would love to book another time, because as we got into this, I was realizing that there were so many different jewels and nuggets, and I think personal development is a complete standalone topic of one or maybe even two different episodes, right? I think that there's a
yeah,
lot to unpack there, and I didn't want to I don't want to go through it too quickly, because I think that there's a lot to unpack. And I think going back to where you're at right now, your success is super well deserved, because I was one of the people that filled out an interest and a contact, and you didn't know me, you didn't owe me anything, and you're being so generous with your time. I really appreciate that. And I can see why people would gravitate towards you. If I was in Erie, it's like I would train with you no problem, because you're a great guy who's continuously learning as well as teaching, and you have a great communication style, and it comes from a place of sincerity, right? Which is awesome, and I think that it's sadly lacking in some other places. And so so I appreciate you doing this, and I'd love to book some more time to get into the personal development. That was kind of shame on me for not being disciplined enough to jump into it earlier, but I felt like we really got rolling. um
yeah. Well, sometimes it's good to just kind of deep dive on something and save other things for later.
yes,
That's totally fine, and I'm happy to come back anytime. I think that it's been really nice to have the opportunity. And I remember in our first conversation, I was kind of digging a little bit, trying to figure out like, why are you paying attention to me? Like, you're in California, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm brand new. Like, how did you even find me? Why do you care what I think?
yeah.
um, so it's a cool little treat, to start the year, to be able to have a good conversation with a new friend. And I just really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm happy to come back anytime you'll have me. So
Thank you so much. And I would love to have you on multiple times, because yeah, I consider you a new friend. And this is, January 2nd, great way to start the year. And so yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure. you're going to be a frequent guest on this show. I am hoping if you would like to be on, I would love to have you on multiple more times. And so great. So thank you so much. So signing off for now and looking forward to having you back on again very soon.
Absolutely. Have a
Thanks,
good one.
Tony. Take care.
Bye.